Hi there, Pat.
Hi.
Welcome to coming on to share your knowledge and your wisdom. We've already had a bit of anatomy. We've had to sort of stop the anatomy so we could actually come on and video something
Thank
to
you.
help the group. So thank you for being here. So you've basically written a book, haven't you? That
Yes,
is
I have.
all about sort of the mother and how you were living with your mother through the caregiving experience, and sort of sharing that aspect. And what we were talking of just before I started recording was all about the dynamics of the parent losing control and how that could lead into trauma
Right.
as well. And we were getting into sort of talking about environmental issues, whatever. I thought, well, maybe we should record this so actually we could share it for everybody as we were getting really stuck into our conversation. So tell me a little bit more about the book, and tell me a little bit more about what you're aiming to achieve by it, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how maybe anybody who watches this can maybe change their relationship with their parent to get a different
Okay. Sure. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I was in the middle of my caregiving journey with my mother. She did live with us, with myself and my husband, for almost 4 years. And I experienced a transformation of the relationship between my mother and I. Like any mother and daughter, we had our share of conflict when I was younger, as a teenager and so
Yeah.
on. But I realized that I really didn't understand who she was growing up. I always saw her as in the context of being my mother, a mother and daughter. And when I was taking care of her, I discovered that, she was a woman. She's a woman just like me, with the same fears, the same insecurities. And I also learned who she was as a person. I always knew that she was independent, but I didn't realize how independent she really was until I started taking care of her. And she started to feel like she was out of control, because here she
Yeah.
was going from living alone to living with her daughter, and, me taking care of her every need. And that was something that she, had a very difficult time accepting. And that, came out in her treatment of me sometimes, and I of her, because of course, I wasn't perfect, and I reacted to a lot of, her insecurities, and realized that, I need to work on my relationship with my mother in order to get through this. So I wrote the book thinking that there are a lot of people in this same situation who felt very alone, because I felt very alone. I felt like even though people knew I was my mother's caregiver, they didn't really know what I was going through, because they weren't actually doing it, and they could, sort of empathize to a point. But I'm sure that there are so many people out there having those same experiences. They were feeling
Definitely.
frustrated, getting depressed, and not
Yeah.
knowing how to deal with
Yeah.
their parents.
There's kind of an expectation that you care for your elder, but actually, if you've experienced a challenging relationship with your parent growing up, or you've experienced abuse, there's often, I know there's certainly been some people in the group who've experienced this, then be expected to care for that person at that point. It's like going, well, wait a minute, you did all this horrible stuff to me. Why would I want to even look after you? And
Mhm.
those sort of challenges of guilt and the whole emotional sort of side of things.
Yeah, I mean, with my experience, I certainly did not grow up with abuse. I mean, I had a very happy childhood. At the same time, I was thinking about those people who did. I'm thinking this situation must be 100 times worse for them. Like you
Yeah.
said, all of a sudden they've experienced all this conflict with their parent growing up, and now they have to take care of them. So I knew that if it was difficult for me, I'm a medical professional, been a nurse for 47 years, and I thought it was going to be, a breeze. Okay, I know how to take care of people. I've been doing it all my life.
Mhm.
But it's so different when it's a family member.
Absolutely, absolutely. I found
And
exactly the same when I was a girl for my dad. It's a,
right, so if it's hard for me, how much harder will it be for someone who isn't a medical person, or
yeah,
for someone
yeah,
who's had a difficult relationship to begin with? And I had a good relationship with my parents,
mm,
growing up,
mm,
without, aside from the normal things, but I learned that I didn't know my mother. And that was, I think, the basis of the whole thing, was that I had a lot of preconceived ideas about who she was based on, my younger years. And then I'm seeing her in her relationship with her friends, which
yeah,
is a whole other a whole other aspect of her losing friends because she was chronically ill.
Yeah.
And then dealing with that part of her being alone and feeling lonely, and where I felt like I had to fulfill that in her when there was no way I could do that.
No, and that, I think it's very much remembering that you're actually equals, and that's what happens with the dynamic. It's actually the parent is still trying to parent in those discussions. You're going, no, I'm one and the same as you. When I moved in with my father, he wasn't having to be cared for particularly, and I said, look, I'm your supporter, not your carer, and he didn't like that. He thought I was being hurtful by not wanting to care for him. And I was like, oh, but you don't need a carer. He was depressed. He wanted a bit of pampering, etc., which I gave him initially. And eventually it's like, no, because I wanted him to be independent again. And if I'd done too much for him, he just would never have got used to doing this. But he wanted me to put my own diary engagements in his diary, like I was his wife. He was like, in the morning, he wanted me to tell him what we were having for dinner. I was like, just woken up, we're going, just be great if you're going to be fed. It was like I was running a full-time business and painting and decorating the whole house at the time. And the dynamics that were going on were challenging, most certainly.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of issues come up that, like, I lived about 1,000 miles away from my mother.
Oh, wow. Okay.
When she moved to Florida, I lived in Pennsylvania. So I didn't really see her for many years. I would visit her. So when you don't see somebody, you don't know what's really going on in their day-to-day life. So I had no idea of any issues or, health issues that she was having other than what she would tell me.
Yeah.
So when we eventually moved to Florida, and I think I was definitely called there knowing that I would be taking care of my mother. I think everything happens for a reason. So I did find out that she had been drinking because she was depressed.
My dad was drinking when I moved in. Maybe I shouldn't say it on film. 2 bottles of whiskey a week. Because he just couldn't cope with the emotional sort of journey about what was going on. It was during the pandemic as well. It was cut off from his friends, everything that brought him happiness, and it was very very challenging time. And so saying, you need to stop drinking so much. I knew you used to drink. I was like, just drink, too much drink.
Yeah, and there's a chapter in my book about that. And I do, I have some humor in there as well, because I feel like you need humor to be able to deal with some of these situations. You know. And there's a story in there. I don't know if I should tell the story or not.
Yeah,
okay. I had, what we call here in the States, a home health aide that would come in and give her a bath and so on, about, say 3 days a week. And I was still working. I was working full time, was another challenge, So I got a call at work one day, and the home health aide said, she said, Miss Pat, she said, your mom has a bottle of gin in the closet. Okay. So I came home from work, and she said that my mother, she picked up a pillowcase. The home health aide picked up a pillowcase, and she thought it was really heavy. And when she looked inside, there was a bottle of gin.
Oh, dear.
And then she found a handbag. She picked up the handbag, and that was heavy. And inside that was a bottle of club soda. So I said, Mom, are you mixing drinks in your bedroom? And she, immediately said, well, blamed me and said, you took my liquor away. And what happened was we had some liquor under the cabinet, and we're not big drinkers, so it was there for a long time. So we decided to move it until we found a better place to put it.
Right.
She thought that I took it away from her, that was why I moved it. So, those kinds of things happened all the time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Again, taking away her choice, taking away her independence. And, and I told her, I said, Mom, I'm not stopping you from any decision that you make, even if I feel it's not a good decision. I'm not going to stop you from making it, but I will intervene in the case of safety. If there's any safety issues, then which I did have.
My dad didn't appreciate us telling him that he was drinking too much, and it's only when he had the TIAs that mini strokes was his wake up call, because he wouldn't listen. you know, and we're saying that's not because he's always drunk whiskey, but it's just the quantity. And he said, well, how do you know how much I'm drinking? I'm going, because I have to go to my uncle's house to pick up the drink and the food. And every time there's more whiskey, I'm thinking, how could there be more whiskey? How could you get through more whiskey?
Oh my gosh.
And it was wine as well. You know, it was just drinking a humongous amount.
I know. And as I was going through this, I'm thinking, you're going through all these emotions, you're going through the anger, and then you're going through the like frustration, and and as a nurse, you want to fix things. I want to fix things, right? I want to find a solution to this problem, So then I had to change how I approached that situation, and understanding that, okay, this was her thing. As long as it wasn't harming her or harming anyone else or whatever, then, I could, go along with that, in moderation. But it was just so different from how I lived my life and how we lived our life. And, and then I was always told growing up, that, oh, you're just like your mother, which is why I wrote the book about mothers and daughters, because there is a definite brain connection between mothers and daughters, oh, you're just like your mother. And I accepted that growing up. And I have, we all have the same mannerisms of our parents, of course, that we can't control and all, but I didn't realize it, and she didn't realize it until this situation, that we didn't think anything alike. We didn't think alike at all. And she even said that to me. She said, you don't think like me, do you? And it was a realization of many that we both came to about our relationship.
Certainly with me and my father, I didn't know him, basically. He was an absent father, as in working too hard, as a deputy head of a big private school as we're growing up. So he wasn't there. If he was home, then he'd go off to sport. So actually I didn't really have, a deep relationship with him. The longest I've spent with him was when I actually lived with him, sort of years and years later. And it was very challenging, and he'd be inappropriate about some of the things he would say, or not be sport about different things. But also, as I was saying to you off camera, having an experience of a mental health experience with him, where I'd asked him, I think I'd said to him, I wasn't about having to change everything in the house or anything like that, but he hadn't really moved on from my mum dying 10 years before. And I was saying, well, so we hadn't changed the furnishings and whatever. And I was saying, well, does every picture in this room bring you joy? No, it doesn't. You want to think maybe changing it. And he went, well, this one behind, this one, this one does. We went to China, we got this, whatever. But that one over there, no, I don't really like that one so much. And all I said was, oh, I quite like that one. Well, what do you mean you like that one? I don't know. And he went completely off on one because I actually expressed what I thought about it. I wasn't saying he had to change it. I was just saying, oh, I like that one.
Yeah.
In comparison to the other one.
Right.
And so much so, it triggered me so much at that time that I just left the room, left the house, was quiet. And, by the time I got to my sister's 25 minutes later, she thought somebody was dead, because it was just this whole split personality thing. He'd be in one moment, he'd be okay, another in front of other people, and another time he'd be like completely not okay. And me not understanding what that was about. Now, I've had mental health issues before, but not to that extreme. But my older sister has had sections many times. My mum was sectioned as well. And I was like, I could see why certain things had happened as well. That's part of it. So I took myself out of the situation. There was a couple of other times where it happened too. And in the end, when I'm not getting into this. No, come back. No, I'm not getting into this. Because he just didn't know how to stop what he was starting. Part of it, I knew just to go, I'm not getting into a conversation about this.
Well, we were talking about the environment when it reminded me when you brought up, things that bring you joy or don't bring you joy. And, I had said off camera that one of my newsletters, I wrote about the history of Florence Nightingale and nursing, and how she actually developed something called the environmental theory, which says that, your environment has a lot to do with healing of an individual. And that was the
Yeah.
basis of hospice
Yeah.
care and home
And
health care.
in my book, Are You Worth It, I talk about the different aspects of your home. And actually, if you've got anything broken, or you've got clutter, or your the room needs painting or whatever, it actually has a subconscious effect on you. So
Yeah.
I'm supporting one lady at the moment through my care role, and her house very cluttered and different aspects of it, and it's just, you can just see what's going on. But actually, when you find out what's happened to her, with her husband, having Alzheimer's, ended up in a nursing home, and her daughter died very suddenly recently.
Wow. Right.
She's got loads of emotional stuff going on, and which is why things in the house are not being done.
Well, right. And another thing that happened with my mother was the same situation, is that she had a mobile home that she lived in by herself. And when she moved into our house, she wanted to bring everything with her. And I said, let's go and see what you want to bring and what you don't want to bring. And she said, no, I want to bring everything. And it took me a while to realize that she was attached to these things, because she never actually moved on from my father's death.
Okay.
Emotionally, I think that's, she had maybe a long-standing off and on depression from that, which I didn't really know, because my mother was very, she was 100% Irish. I have to say that contributed to her stoicism. She didn't talk a lot about her emotions and her feelings. She kept everything in. So that never really came out, but it came out with all the clutter, and when we had to empty out her house, I'll have to tell you, Liz, we had 2 dumpsters in the driveway.
Oh dear.
And what came out of that house was just unbelievable, and I thought, this is what she's been living with. So it was a reflection of her depression. And then it went along with the drinking. And so then when I started to understand the origin of all of this, and why this was
There's
happening.
an awful lot that's not done to support the elderly through that. I mean, in general, people not understand their emotions or whatever. And I know all of my work is about emotions and how to deal with them. And if you're going up and down emotionally, today's full moon, much more emotional on the full moon. It can really impact your mental health, etc. You can feel all over the place as part of it. And what I'm envisaged with my dad, but also when I going into elderly people's homes, is actually how emotionally they've not talked about things, because we are, well, it's like the British stiff upper lip, we don't talk about things we should mention on it. And actually, if you don't deal with those emotions, negative emotions become toxic to the body. It's you not listening to your body, not looking after yourself, and eventually you're either at ease with yourself, relax, or disease. And it's about having that awareness of things. And if you're too much in your mind, I have one person I support who's he's got a brain tumor, but he's also got dementia in his 80s, dementia and Alzheimer's. And actually had a very successful business. But I tell you, he's a warning to me not to overdo it, because I think he completely overdid, overthinking things and whatever over time. And now he's just like his brain's fried. He can't cope with things.
Because it's energy, it has to come out somehow, And my mother, she had a huge heart. She had a very big heart. She was very, very loving, but she wanted to maintain her independence at all costs. And it was difficult for her to accept help, which I think I have been guilty of also. And that's like an ongoing learning process for me to accept.
I have a chapter in my book about giving and receiving, actually, because that's one of my issues was not receiving help.
Right, not receiving.
I was an overgiver and not wanted to receive from others. Yeah, most definitely.
Right. So that's the thing with being a nurse too, is that you're giving, and not realizing that you deserve to receive as well. And so I gave and gave and gave taking care of my mother. And, you know, to be honest, that it was my choice to do that, you know. Um, and another issue that came up, which I don't know if I have um, read this of what people wrote on the support group,
Mhm.
but my husband, now there's another aspect when you have, you know, another person in the home, right? My husband and my mother were two entirely different people. And he had never been in that situation before where he needed to take care of anyone. So he didn't know what that was about. He's not in the medical field, you know,
Yeah.
and they clashed. And there was a lot of tension and a lot of stress and a
Yeah.
lot of conflict.
There can be
Again,
a lot of resentment, and the fact that your
yeah,
relationship's changed, and you could be, if you're drawn too much into the parent and you're not spending enough time with that relationship.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Challenging.
So it was almost like, as the caregiver, I really felt like I was pulled in all these different directions.
Yeah.
So I know that there are a lot of people out there who feel that way,
Yeah.
regardless of what their circumstances are. They feel like they're being tugged and pulled, you know, all over the place. And, you know, when I wrote the book, I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, you know, how can I, you know, kind of um, tap into people's emotions with this and just validate what they're feeling, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
during this process. I mean, it's not a self-help book. I think there's a lot
Yeah.
of self-help books out
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
but it's more tapping into the emotions and trying to get through like on a daily basis.
Yeah. And like with my work, it's very much about getting people to realize that they are having a negative emotion, that if there is that clash, what can you change about it? But also there are techniques you can learn to let go of that negative emotion, because you'll have a better experience with
Yeah.
your loved one if you actually, have got rid of that toxicity. So you've, even if they have been mean to you or horrible to you in the past, you've let that go, that you're living in the present. Because actually, when we let
Hmm.
that go, you can let in for a very different relationship. And actually, I have to say, my relationship with my father, I wouldn't have said when I was living with him was better, but now that I'm not with him anymore, it is better. It's different. Yeah, there's a
Hmm.
different dynamic again. Can't say
Right.
he still understands me, because he doesn't know how to, I think, connect with me to find out about me. He's just not interested. There's no point me trying to get him interested. He has also had many strokes now, so it could be brain damage or whatever. Um,
Right.
but it's, yeah, that sort of, I know that he does care, he does love me, but it's just, it doesn't
Well, that's
become
why,
what I
you
do as
know,
well, which that's part of it.
yeah, love is it really. I mean, that's why I, you know, that's the title of my book, Love. Anyway, you know, that's what it comes down to, is, you know, tapping into the fact that you love this person, you love your parent regardless of who they are or what they've done, and that is the motivator in doing what we do, in
Yeah.
taking care of them, you know. And you mentioned your relationship was changed, you know, and the relationship with my mother could not have been any better,
Mm.
really, you know. And I think that if I didn't have this experience of taking care of her, then the relationship would not have been what I wanted it to be.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't have,
Yeah.
you know. And you know, the caregiving experience, as difficult as it was, um, and is for a lot of people, you know, know a lot of people have done it much longer than I have done it, and, you know, are dealing with uh, horrendous situations, you
Mm.
know.
Mm.
Um, I just feel that, like I said, everything has a reason, you know,
Yeah.
and that we can
Yeah.
learn from this. We can
Yeah.
learn
Yeah.
from how
Absolutely.
to deal with these situations, how to deal
Yeah.
with our
Yeah.
emotions, and it
I
makes us
think
better
also
people.
for me, it's about, it also reduces elder abuse as well, if you
Yeah,
actually understand about how you're interacting with them, because it can be, if you choose it to be, hugely frustrating when the other person isn't doing what you're asking them to do. That can be in any situation, not just with elders in
yeah,
care. But I think actually some elder abuse happens because of that vulnerability, and that it's understanding that we're both equals. As part is very important.
it's true. That's true.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, I talk about the mother-daughter, like I said in my newsletter, the mother-daughter connection, and they've actually done a study. The Journal of Neuroscience did a study on empathy and
Mm.
how the mother-daughter bond is the strongest of all relationships,
Mm.
you know, and how you learn empathy from your mother, you know, and because your mother can understand the situation you're in as a woman, you know, and of course, you know, there's empathy with, you know, sons and mothers as well. Of course, you know, I'm not, you know, diminishing that, but there's a different type of neurochemical reaction in the brain with, you know, with mothers and daughters, you know, so, you know, that is the other reason why I felt that I kind of wanted to stress that, you know, not apart from the fact that that was my experience. And most caregivers of mothers are daughters, statistically, at least in this country they are. And so I think I wanted to address that and just give the daughters some, you know, some hope. And that's what I'm writing about. My second book is hope after caregiving. You know.
Because I think there's a very different journey going on to, you know, when you're, it's also about your identity changes, isn't it? Because if you've given an awful lot of your time into caregiving, and then suddenly your parent's not there anymore, it's, you know, what next? And actually you can become very lost at that particular time and lose hope. And the emotion that sits behind depression is hopelessness as well. And one of the reasons why I put a grief guide in when somebody dies is because I want them to understand that if they stay in the group, that they would actually be, you know, staying on task, sharing. So they're actually, rather than going into that slope, you know, as well. It's very important that people realize that there is that change. You've got to change your identity when, you know, your loved one goes. There's, you know, you don't have to go into, you know, a negative thing. It's actually can be a very positive, which clearly what's happened for you is with your writing and actually showing that.
Right. And I know that there are people who, after caregiving, have lost their jobs because they had to give it up to take care of their parent. So then you have where they have to find a job or they have to find income. And I think I read something where some woman actually said homelessness, where she may have lost her home or, you know. And
well, I think because often you have to sell the person's home to fund the care. Certainly here in the UK, you only get a couple of weeks sort of support of, you know, let's say your parent had a stroke and they're suddenly at high, you know, and you have to fund that care to support them, you know.
Right. So I didn't think about that before, Liz, until I read that woman's, you know, post about how that happened to her. So I am looking for people who I'd like to interview, you know, what happened to their life after caregiving. I really think that you and I have like kind of a symbiotic, I guess is the word, thing going on here, because you're, you know, I'm talking about processing emotions, and you have the balance program, which helps people do that, you know, and so I think, you know, we could work together on that.
Most definitely. Well, it's been a pleasure to interview you. I'm going to stop the record right now. So thank you for your time, and I'll share for anybody listening in, I'll share the information about Pat's book and how to get in touch with her in the comments when I load it into the group.
Okay, thank you.